Oh, I think I'm on. Yes, good. Thanks, Luke. And thank you for the opportunity to come and talk about what we're up to at National Australia Bank. We're very excited with our progress with Pega and with Luke and team, and we think we're doing something a little bit unique with their product. Interestingly, a number of the stories that you've heard today and a number of the discussions, you will see that some of that plays out within what we're trying to achieve as a team. Around about 18 months ago, NAB embarked on a multi-year transformation to make ourselves simpler and faster for our customers. Since then, we've picked up a couple of remediation projects as well. Can't think why, but it's probably a little too soon for anything around that one. But look, before I go on, the first thing I need to do is just acknowledge the team. We've got a few of them in the room today, and I know a few people have actually come up to me and said they've already met some of them. So if there's anything you see in my presentation today that sparks your interest, please feel free to go and talk to them about it. Don't come and talk to me about it. I'm just the good-looking guy who gets to stand up the front, I'm going to show you a brief video. I promise it is brief. It's actually something we produced as an initial sort of training video for some of our internal teams when we started rolling Universal Workflow out. I think it just sets the scene a little bit, so let's roll that and then we'll get into it.
Hello, and welcome to NAB Universal Workflow. NAB Universal Workflow, or NUW, is our key strategic enterprise digital process system. In other words, it's a user-friendly system that will help you manage cases across the NAB group, making things quicker, simpler, and easier for you at work, and providing an exceptional customer experience. NUW includes some great features that will make it easier for us to serve our customers. This includes consolidating all contact with customers so you have all their information in a single place, the ability to send and receive emails or pen and unpenned cases without affecting the SLA. You can manually create a new case on the fly, meaning you can talk to a customer on the phone and capture the details at the same time. And you can have multiple parallel assignments in flight for the same case, with all case notes and auditable activities captured. If NAB Universal Workflow can help your business to reach your goals, please get in touch. It's all part of the service.
So as you can see, just something we show internally. And when you look at that, and if you've been working with Pega for a little while, you probably look at that and think, well, that sounds interesting, but probably nothing that's going to knock your socks off in terms of sort of capabilities or features. We believe the uniqueness around it is how we've managed to bring together a combination of speed to market, configurability across many different types of business problem, and also how we bring those features to market very rapidly. And as we get into the presentation, you'll see there's a few bells and whistles in there that we don't really talk about in the video, but actually were very much part of what Jeff and Michael were talking about earlier when they were talking about some of the funky stuff that's coming in Pega Infinity. So what is Universal Workflow? Well, it's a framework at the end of the day of reusable components. It means our workflows can be designed and built in weeks. In reality, we can actually build features and put them out the same day if we choose to. It's got a targeted set of benefits across a series of measures, efficiency, customer satisfaction, transparency. But because we actually use a very fixed framework around how we do this, it actually allows us to be very consistent in the way that we both manage work internally within NAB. So it doesn't matter whether you're in a customer servicing team or the group tax team, you will be working off the same set of components and the same sort of case structures. So we can be very efficient and effective in the way that we manage work internally. Anyway, let's get into it a little bit. So I'll talk a little bit more around some of the features that we have within the framework. So you heard a lot earlier on from the guys around IVA and around natural language processing. Well, we use that. We're one of the first adopters of that in the world. And we're very happy with it. I'm going to talk about it in a bit more detail on the next slide, so I won't go into it too much now. We can build very dynamic processes. So we can build a set of pre-configured conditions and business rules, and we can assemble that very rapidly because we use these pre-configured components allowing us to do that. And we can configure data models per case type in the same fashion. We've got a suite of real-time operational reporting that sits off the back of this. So if you think a little around what I was talking about earlier around our ability to have things in a consistent way, actually being able to report operationally in a consistent way is really important to us as well. So we've been able to build that as a suite of capability. And something that's in development at the moment and will be available in the next couple of months is actually starting to put some more strategic reporting around that as well. So we will have an ability where we can start doing things like what-if analysis and trend analysis around work that is flowing through our organization, and actually really sort of start to look at some of the trends, particularly around customer service, where we're meeting SLA, where we're not meeting SLA, and what can we do about that to improve the service to the overall customer. We can do SLAs both at the case level and at the assignment level as well, so we're not limited to just thinking about cases in a very monolithic way. We can have federated cases, we can push work. So we can take in a single customer request, we can split that into multiple assignments, we can achieve SLAs against those assignments, then bring it back up so that the customer gets a full outcome around their request. We use robotic automation. I've put RPA up there, Alan, I'm sorry. I'll change the slide for next time. But we basically use both RPA and RDA. And again, I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. We recognized very early that the position that Pega and Alan was talking about earlier on around this concept of digital transformation is really important. But what we also see is that within our organization, I'm sure the same as many large corporates, is that the pace of change around building out a service structure and building APIs, particularly around some of the significant legacy that we have to deal with, is time consuming, it's costly, it's expensive. So we're increasingly looking at where we can leverage automation to really help us accelerate that. And it might be that we do it for a 6-month period whilst we wait for something to be delivered. It might be that we do it forever. It's really very situational, but we have those capabilities available for us within the framework, so we can do it if we choose to. We can case create from pretty much any channel, email, bulk upload, digital, carrier pigeon, you name it. And we've got things like inbuilt correspondence and single sign-on. One of the things we thought about when we first sort of really started thinking about universal workflow was, well, what are the key principles we need from day one? And we had sort of 3 or 4 that were quite important to us. The first one is, a feature only actually gets added if it's of value to the overall framework. We do leverage the layer cake quite heavily. If we need to specialize within a particular business area when we roll out the framework, then we use the layer cake. We don't build bespoke features in there, because we find that by keeping that level of purity around the framework, it allows us to be more agile and adaptable as to how we deal with the various business situations. We also build integrations such they can be reused. We've got all the standard stuff, of course, email, single sign-on, digital channels. We're starting to bring in things like customer data and other things now as well. And increasingly, for instance, we talk about correspondence, being able to pull things like customer data into the flow so that we can just generate correspondence on the fly is obviously very important. Had to be fully cloud, had to be DevOps. Again, I'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. And what's really important to us is it had to be business configurable. So something that's a really important point here is that we don't have developers building our applications. We have people in the business building it. And we basically look at that as being a key outcome, that we want to increasingly move people away from the code. We want people to be thinking about the customer problem they're trying to solve, not thinking about how they can code up the latest whizzy algorithm to make this thing work better. And then the final one is, the framework has to be open. So we wanted it to be able to expand it over time. We didn't want it to be done in an uncontrolled way, so it needs to be controlled, but we wanted it to be open enough such that if we identify new features we require within any of our deployments, then those can be brought back into the core framework and leveraged for reuse. Now, I mentioned the IVA earlier on. This is probably the star of the show for us in this particular capability at the moment. It's a really important capability to us. When we first started looking at sort of Pega and at the universal workflow, we had a bit of an idea of how we wanted to be able to do this. Now, I'm sure many of you in this room who work for any sort of medium or large corporate are as tied to email as we are. We frankly are sort of avalanched with the stuff on a daily basis. And that applies as much internally as it does with our customers and with our servicing team and our bankers and everybody else. And you know, when we look at what our customer servicing and our operations teams do, they spend a huge amount of time reading, interpreting, triaging emails from customers and bankers and internal teams. You know, we have bankers out in the field. They get a request in their email from a customer. They just forward that straight back into a central mailbox somewhere. Someone then has to read down 15 layers into that email and try and figure out what actually needs to happen. And as you can imagine, it's not an efficient process, but equally it's not a great customer process as well, because a lot of it is very much a point-to-point communication, so things get lost, and increasingly as well, you know, there's misinterpretation of what's been asked for, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we've leveraged IVA for that. And you know, we're really looking to that to improve those customer outcomes, and the statistics really speak for themselves. You know, we've been immensely impressed. We've got 19 listeners now live. We don't use it, I should stress, we don't use this on every single one of the deployments that we've done. I think roughly at most recent count, we've got about 7 or 8 of our sort of business units that are actually leveraging this capability. So that went live in July of last year when we went live with the overall platform. We've got about 34,000 emails have already been passed through the system, and we're getting roughly about a 75% auto-classification rate. So that's 34,000 emails that used to require a human to look at them, think about it, try and figure out what's going on, phone somebody up, you know, et cetera, et cetera. Doesn't happen. Auto creates the case. We're getting to the stage now where it's actually being able to put assignments down below that as well. And of course, that number is actually moving at a very exponential rate. So the first 3 months of the platform going live, we obviously were taking things easy. We didn't want to push the boundaries too much. But over the last few months, we've brought on a lot of teams. We put a new team on, in fact, 2 new teams on about a month ago now in our merchants area within our business bank. They respond to roughly about 3,000 emails a week. Our original premise was that we would get something in the region of about a 40% auto classification on the first pass with our models that we built. We hit literally 70% within 3 weeks. You know, so it was really, really impressive. They're loving it. They have the control of the model. We don't control the model, they do. So they can tweak that as they go. And frankly, it's transforming the way some of those teams are doing their work. You know, it's easy sometimes, I think, when you sit in rooms like this, or you talk to people like Alan, you talk about digital transformation, that you have this view of this glorious digital world that we're all moving into. But the reality is anybody who works in a bank and goes and sits in a back office will know what antiquated technology truly, truly is. You know, I mean, some of those systems that Alan mentioned earlier on, I'm pretty confident we've probably still got a few of those. And probably a few more as well. So when we deliver these types of capabilities to them, and we do it in the timeframes that we do, it's absolutely transformative for our users and our bankers and our operations staff as well. So, you know, I think often some of the best feedback we get is from those people just thanking us for those sort of capabilities. The other thing we probably should talk about a little bit is how we develop the pattern over time. So we went live, as I said, in July last year. So we've been running roughly about 6 months now, if we sort of take Christmas out of the frame. But it's been very much designed so we can add new features to it over time. So it's not a one-stop shop. It's a constant growing capability. We've had 4 major releases since July, and we've put about 50 new or enhanced features into the pattern since we did that. And we do that, as I say, on about a sort of 2 to 3 monthly basis. Some sort of examples of those new features, bulk upload of new cases. So we started working quite heavily with our financial crimes team, so for things like KYC and stuff like that. And one of the things as a bank we have to do on an annual basis is go through a KYC refresh process. So we go through all of those people who've got dormant accounts or accounts that haven't been accessed for a period of time, and we have to go through and check and make sure that our details around those people are current, and if they're not, we have certain remedial activities we need to take. Very manual, very heavy duty kind of just churning through cases. they were managing most of that off spreadsheets, SharePoint, you name it. So we've now put that onto Universal Workflow. But one of their real requirements was, well, actually, what we do is we run a trawl through the back-end systems, and we effectively create a spreadsheet that has a list of all of the counts we want to go and investigate. Can we just upload those into the system so that we don't have to manually go through and create all these cases? And we said, yeah, we reckon we can do that. And literally, the guys turned it around in weeks. I mean, it was very impressive. Another feature was the ability to create multiple assignments so that we could actually federate work. We talk about automating the enterprise. What we want to be able to do with human-centric work is not be tied to business line, tied to product line. We want the ability to say, if we're doing a credit assessment for a banker, a business bank customer, we want to be able to use potentially the same team to do the credit assessment for a retail banking customer. So we want the ability to be able to look at pieces of work by the type of the work, not actually by the team that it comes into. So we've been able to sort of build that functionality, so that's now just configurable out the box. And any new features that we develop are pretty much available to any of the existing workflows with some simple reconfiguration, or if it's an enhancement, then they just automatically inherit it. We've got roughly 11 onboarding squads. The team as a whole is around about 150 people now across both sort of technology and the business, so growing pretty rapidly. That's grown from, I think it was about 8 of us last January. So we leverage our partners very, very heavily in that, a number of whom are here today. We're working across retail, we're working across business bank, we're working across our corporate and institutional bank, frontline, and demand is high. I mean, frankly, we can barely keep up at the moment. We have people beating a path to our door on a daily basis, wanting to talk about how they can get on board and get involved. So it's a really nice problem to have, but a challenging problem to have. And one of the reasons why I always make sure I acknowledge the team is because I just desperately need them to stay with us, not go and work for somebody else. So let's talk cloud. Great picture, eh? Oh, look at that. Now I got to be honest, my interest level in this is high because it makes us able to do most of the things that we actually do. My understanding level of it probably not so great. And when I talk about this and think about this, in truth, what you see on the screen there sort of sits somewhere in my interest levels between, the fairly persistent request from my wife to kind of think about decorating the lounge and the Welsh rugby team. Anybody who follows rugby will know what I'm talking about as a good Englishman. Look, it's really important, and we have people in our organization who are really passionate about this stuff, and they're doing some fabulous stuff with the cloud, both in AWS and Azure. But this for me, it just talks about agility. We leverage AWS. It's on our private cloud on AWS, and we've given it its name because everything has to have a name. So we call it the NAB Process Cloud. We thought it sounded kind of funky. And it leverages all the stuff you'd expect. It's got DevOps, it's got scalability, it's got availability. But for us, the key message is about speed, it's about cost, it's about scalability, it's about flexibility. Something I constantly reflect on. I've known these guys for a long time now. I've worked in other organizations with Pega. And what astounded me about this time around with NAB was that we went literally from a contract signing to a full production deployment in 6 months on the cloud. And in a previous organization, it took us about 9 months to get a development environment. I mean, this is the difference we're talking about here. It is just astounding. We are immensely pleased with the performance we're getting out of the cloud. It comes with its challenges. I'm not going to be naive about that. It's you have to think about things a little bit differently. Obviously, we have to go through, because we're a bank, we have to go through regulatory approvals and various other bits and pieces. And in fact, in reality, without that, we would have probably come in considerably under the 6-month period for having things up and running. So it's a phenomenal enabler. It's very much our bank strategy. We are moving to the cloud nowadays, and this is a wonderful thing. You don't have to justify why you go on the cloud. You have to justify why you don't. And we're shifting a lot of our older platforms to the cloud as well. And we're leveraging things like Kong as our API gateway and various other things as well, so that we can start to bring in those services from other service teams, so that we can build that really enterprise view of how we want our organization to sort of move forward. Another thing that's been really important is how we actually get this out to our user community, out to our customers. Our delivery model is incredibly aligned to the business. So we have a series of delivery leads, a number of whom are here with us today. And they work very closely with their relevant business areas. We have a demand squad, so we have a demand process we go through. And that demand team go in first. They're kind of our scouts, if you like. They go in and do the initial scoping work. And they look at a range of things. They don't just look at workflow as workflow. They look at automation. They look at a number of aspects of what we can do. We work very closely with a number of other teams, particularly the business process transformation team. So they're often the ones who are bringing the opportunities to us when they start to see those through some of the work that they're doing. And basically, so they'll do that scoping, they'll do that shaping, they'll have a look, they'll say, right, we think this is a suitable opportunity for something like universal workflow. I should also stress, actually, we are doing work outside of universal workflow within the bank. So for instance, we're just kicking off on a journey with Smart Investigate in the payments space. So there are times where we look at it and go, actually, you need something a little bit different here. So we're not gonna not talk to you, but we're gonna talk to you in a little bit of a different context. Once the demand squad is through, and if we've identified it and we've prioritized the work and we've decided we're going to do it, then we work on a very blended, agile sort of delivery model. So we have onboarding squads. Those onboarding squads are made up of a series of people, depending on what type of work we're doing. So they might have some workflow people in there. They might have some robotics people in there. Increasingly, those two skill sets we're bringing together so that we've got configurers who can do robotics as well as doing workflow. We pull in the SMEs, as you would expect, as well. And they just work as a blended delivery team. And what we're finding really flattering is that often a number of the SMEs who come in to work in those squads, they shuffle up a few months later and go, any chance for a job, basically, because they love what they're doing and they really enjoy that engagement and being part of something of that sort of nature. Our forward plans are, though, that we want to actually move even more down that path. So we're looking to federate delivery out to the businesses. We believe actually most of the businesses could do their own work in this space, certainly for those simpler use cases. So that's a real target for this year, is to actually be in a position where we can effectively enable those businesses to start driving their own change and driving their own transformation. We look at around about an 8 to a 10-week delivery cycle. Most of that time, in truth, is actually around the business rather than the platform itself. We can configure the workflows often in days or weeks, but we need to obviously go through a bit of a change cycle with the relevant business areas, get them properly engaged, and make sure that they are enjoying and being part of the process rather than feeling like it's just being done to them. And on our design and build process are very iterative, very rapid. I mean, we are regularly saying, we have a phone call in the morning from a business saying we'd just like to tweak something, and we'll just pop the change in that afternoon. That's the beauty of a DevOps pipeline, is we can actually do that. And as I said earlier on, our onboarding teams are becoming much more multidisciplinary. So there's few deployments we're doing now where we're not looking at doing workflow as well as potentially doing robotics and other things too. The other thing, and actually it's hopefully getting switched on today, Stefan, if you're in the room, is we're also going to be leveraging Pega workforce intelligence. So we've got our pilot of that starting from today with one of our teams. We're pretty excited about it. We think it will give us a lot of information around how we want universal workflow to work, how we can optimize some of our processes, and we think it could be a great capability to really help sort of turbocharge some of our work. So quite excited about that one. So just to wrap up, I thought I'd talk a little bit around some of the achievements and the overall business rollout and where we've gone to. So as I said, we went live July last year. We've been running now roughly for about 6 or 7 months. And that is literally from a cold start. So we've put about 60 successful deployments into production, and when I say 60, this is a real testament to our technology teams. They do phenomenal work every day, and put some amazing hours in. But we haven't had a major deployment yet that's had an issue. I mean, we get the odd little bit of kind of having to jiggle it into place, but generally speaking, it's been very smooth, and they've done a fantastic job. And that's not just within our own service area. We very heavily rely on the cloud teams and others as well, and they do great work for us. So we've done about 60, so that's a deployment about every 3 days, which, you know, I mean, frankly, if we went back 5 years, would have just been unthinkable, frankly. I mean, how you would have ever even considered that. And we've, as I say, we've just done our first pilot deployment of Pega robotics, and we've got a whole bunch more in development currently. Just talk some of the numbers. So we've had about 112,000 cases to date through the system. That number is on a very exponential curve. So every time I write this slide, it's probably fairly out of date. And that covers roughly about 210 different processes. So in about 6 months, we've basically gone across roughly 14 business units, and we've put about 210 effectively unique business processes into production, which has, you know, got a lot of attention internally, because they can see how quickly we're able to really deliver improvements both to frontline and back office. We're up to about 500 plus users on the system as well. I think I mentioned earlier on, we have about 34,000 cases, about 70% of those are using NLP and are being sort of successfully auto-classified. We've got a big roadmap for FY19. I've mentioned a few of the areas we talked about. So our business bank is particularly important to us at NAB. We're obviously very much first and foremost a business bank. Fin crime and those areas, obviously again in the current climate, really important. And areas like business lending and home lending. I thought I might just talk about a couple of quick examples just as I close. One of the areas we've been working very heavily in is with our KYC teams, our financial crime teams. We have got a big program of work with those guys. We're developing a lot of new features. We've got actually 2 dedicated squads that literally work with them full time. And that's across everything from transaction monitoring through to sort of KYC. We are basically increasingly integrating our delivery into their overall sort of transformation program. We will eventually be managing pretty much everything that comes out of our financial crimes detection systems on Pega as anything that needs to be case managed. So it's a really important capability and an area we're really excited about. The other one is our home lending channel. Obviously, responsible lending is something that's a lot in the press nowadays, and it is, you know, really important. We're currently developing a platform where we really use universal workflow as the harness for how we actually manage works into things like our verification team. So we use automation in there as well. You know, we found that probably roughly about 90 to 95% of the verification tasks we currently do manually could actually be run by a bot. So, you know, this is really quite important stuff for us. So overall, you know, great progress, but massive sort of agenda ahead, and we're really excited about that. We're going to be at Pega World this year as well, just to keep the shout-outs going. We're going to be presenting there, and we'll be talking about some similar things, hopefully a few more things as well, because we've got some stuff in the pipe we haven't talked about yet. And you know, look forward hopefully to seeing some of you there. So just like to take opportunity to say thank you. Really enjoyed the opportunity to present today, and I'll hand back over to Lou.